It's nice to see a lot of new faces tonight. We normally have the buildings crew here, but we've got gardening people here, which are my people. I wanted to have a slide up tonight, but I didn't get to it today. But if you saw on the little flyer that I left out on the table, up in the left-hand corner, there's a little kind of a crossword puzzle image. But it's not a crossword puzzle. Does anybody know what it is? Because if you come to a library lecture, you have to go home and have learned at least one new thing.
Barcode scan.
It's a barcode scanning. It's actually called a QR code. And QR stands for quick read or quick response. And you can, if you have a smartphone, what you can do is take a picture with your phone of that symbol. And what that symbol will do is take you to the web page for our adult events on the library's website. And I put that one on because it's for library events. But what you will be seeing in the future in the library, because we are going to start using QR codes, in your books, we are going to have Reader's Advisory QR codes. So if you take a mystery book home, in the back you're going to find a little QR code. Use your smartphone on it, read the code. It's going to take you to a page on our website that will give you other books you might like. And then you can go right from there to our catalog and put them on hold. It's called speed reading. It's coming. It's coming. QR codes are all over the place right now. They're ubiquitous in Japan. They're being used widely in Asia. If you go to the Dulles Airport now, you will find QR codes on all the posters in the terminals. Those happen to be for either NASA sites or for Smithsonian sites. Museums are using them very widely, and they are going to be more and more ubiquitous in the United States in the next few years. Just watch and see. All right, so you've learned one thing tonight. You've got to learn another thing. We have Louis Raymond tonight, landscape designer extraordinaire, and he will be talking in 2 minutes. On April 1st, mark down your calendars, on April Fool's Day, Bill Grover, partner emeritus from Centerbrook, will be here to speak about color in architecture. And that will be fabulous because I hope he'll be bringing some of his watercolors on the screen to show you. On April 22nd, we have Chuck Benson. Dr. Chuck Benson is coming back to speak. If anybody had seen him last year, he'll be speaking about Bernini, a Renaissance architect in Italy, and it'll be another fabulous display on screen. And we go on from there. May 20th, we have Raphael Pelli, who's coming to talk about sustainability in some gigantic buildings around the world. And we have David Greenbaum from the Smith Group on June 3rd. It's our VE celebration weekend. And he'll be talking about the Normandy Cemetery Visitor Center that they designed. And it's a gorgeous, very emotional place, and you'll enjoy that program as well. So, on to thanking Beth Goodnow, our Essex Meadows hostess extraordinary, who has put together a nice, beautiful new room. I don't know if you've noticed, it's been painted. They're working on curtains. But we have fresh paint, fresh carpet, fresh ceiling, so an even nicer, wonderful space that we can come into, and the library extends a huge, huge warm hand of gratitude for being able to come here, because if we couldn't come here, only about half of you would be able to be here at the library, because our room only seats 65. So thank you to Essex Meadows, and thank you to Centerbrook Architects as well for providing the financial assistance to get these programs done. We could not garner the kinds of speakers that we do without Centerbrook's help. And so now here to a man who's been down a few garden paths himself, my husband, Jim Childress.
Lost in those paths. I'm thrilled to introduce Louis Raymond. He's not a QR code, he's a real guy. He's here. He's really a virtuoso in landscape design. He also, if you don't know him, he's got 3 degrees, one in chemistry, voice, and piano, and several years of medical studies at the University of Pittsburgh. He's got a flourishing career in opera and concert singing. He's a freelance writer for New York magazines of various sorts, and he's a garden designer. I think he loves plants. And what are you going to do? You got to do it. He was the designer for the annual New England Spring Flowers Show, and his firm, Renaissance Gardening, designs residential and corporate gardens. They've been published in Metropolitan Home, House and Garden, Design Magazine, and others. He does lecture around the country for a fee, and Ann gives me credit for sponsoring this stuff. We really don't do anything other than call and plead. And David Hallahan in our office knew Louis, and we just kind of leaned on him and said, would you please, it's for the library. So please give him a warm welcome for coming and talking to us. It should be enjoyable.
We don't have dueling mics here. Okay. Wow, I think I am loud now. No comments, please. Okay. Great, I am so delighted to be back at Essex Meadows. I was talking with Beth earlier, and we couldn't recall when I had been here, but I lectured to a garden club, I think, about 6 or 7 years ago. It was such a wonderful experience, and this is a wonderful room. And you have one of the biggest screens ever. So I'm just delighted to be back, and just really excited also about this lecture. And tonight's iteration of this lecture is somewhat new for me, because I've given this lecture for many years, and it started because of this opening anecdote. The people who were involved in this opening anecdote, to my astonishment and delight, actually are at this lecture. And all these years I've been yapping about them without them knowing it. So now they're going to know what I said. Is this too loud? Should I no? Not too loud? Okay, I'm just getting a little buzz up here. And this anecdote was one of the first indications that there was something going on with this whole formality thing in the garden. And it was more complicated and more complex and therefore more interesting than I really had a clue about. And so here's what this little anecdote is. In Massachusetts, in one of the great towns in the west of Massachusetts, a very, very old and discreetly renowned family has a discreetly renowned graveyard, which happens to be circular. And generations are buried further out in their genealogical segment with the head honcho in the middle of it. And the challenge, I was called in to do a bit of consulting because it's called a pie, and the pie was getting a little full, and they wanted to see how they could expand it into an adjacent meadow. And we were going back and forth on how to do this, and this option and that option. And then I said, without a clue in the world, I said, well, you know, of course, we could just put a hedge around it, thinking that it's a cemetery and a sense of enclosure would help the sort of, you know, solemn energy and the meaningfulness of the whole place, stuff like that. And to my amazement, the then sort of matriarch of the whole clan, who was even more discreetly renowned and whatever, who I thought would have just come from a lifetime of immaculate hedges, pruned by the mile and pruned to the millimeter. She blanched, and she said, well, but if you put a hedge around it, it would look formal. And I was completely puzzled because I thought her whole life had been in formal landscapes, that I just had her pegged in this position, so I realized there was something about formality I didn't quite understand. And then I saw this cartoon. This is a Helen Hokinson cartoon, and Helen is mad at me. All right. With typical Helen Hokinson matrons, sort of looking over a memorial garden, and the caption, one says to the other, we used to know some people who had a formal garden, but they drank. And I thought, well, what is this about? What is this formality thing? I better find out. So I began to think about it, and of course, the more I began to think about it, I found that the aspects of formality were everywhere, and also were very strange and fun anecdotes about formality that give us a handle into why this is so complicated, actually only for Americans. We're unique in the world in our puzzlement about formality. So some of the elements of it, let's figure that out. One of them is discipline. I was very pleased to be able to go out to Los Angeles in January, and I did a second pilgrimage to the Getty Center out there, which I would recommend that any of you, if you have not been, please go. If you ever had $1.5 billion to spend, that is the model of how to do it fantastically. And you can see this is a very disciplined landscape. All the angles are 90 degrees, or at least they're very sharp. Those trees are pruned within an inch of their life. Even the little, let's see if I can use this thing here. Oh, look at that. All the fescues are just lined up. Everything is down to the millimeter. Discipline is really a part of formality. Am I going the right way? Yes. Here's another. This is not one of my projects. I will shamelessly identify all the projects here, but this is one of my idols. This is a Belgian Jacques Weerts, and this is one of his just staggering landscapes with apparently miles of hedge pruned to the millimeter. And that looks to be about 4 or 5 feet tall, so it's, I don't know, staff of 10 on there. But here's another. Imagine the discipline. This doesn't deviate more than a couple of inches ever. And another element of formality is, this may seem self-evident, but these are all little tricks. I'm going to trip us all up as this goes on. Symmetry, well, duh. This is a villa done by another hero of mine, Russell Page, and this is near Turin in Italy. No, I haven't been here. I yearn for these kinds of clients, but not just because it was a villa in Italy, but apparently this was just a stupid 20-foot slope. And so he said, oh no, you have to do lots of stonework. I mean, anybody in our business, when they do lots of stonework, our hearts just palpitate because the budget just keeps getting bigger. It's all very exciting. So, and look at how symmetrical it is indeed. And then if you look the other way, hold on. No, hold on. I'm going to get this right. Come on, go back. There we go. You look down, you see this amazing, how much clipping is there in that? And how many different levels and how many box balls are precisely placed, the way box balls always need to be precisely placed. So symmetry is quite important in formality, and is frank geometry. This is a period shot, which I just discovered, and I didn't quite understand it. Just give me a stage, I know. Because I was looking at these elephant ears thinking, oh, I love elephant ears. And then I realized that there were actually, can you see these stars on the ground here? Full of like little low creeping things pruned with an inch of their lives. And then there's like more of them and more of them. And then the satisfied head gardener who still has his white shirt on looking over this. I mean, it's all just like really horrifying. But then again, it's in Knoxville, so, you know. But think about the geometry there. Now here, this is more important geometry and more sustaining. This is an aerial view of the Getty Center. And I did not take this. I just cribbed this from WikiCommons, thank you. But again, $1.5 billion, just trust me, it's so worth it. You're at the top of this hill in Los Angeles. You're overlooking the entire rest of the world. But the architect Richard Meyer doesn't have you just go to the end and look at something. He shapes the space every inch of the way. So if you want to just walk through from there to there, of course you need to do that. But let's put an arch right there, so when you walk from here to there, you're in a different space. It's exciting. Then you have to walk back to go from there to here, and then back again. And then you finally remember there's a view to go. So like the whole day can go by here, because the space is so carefully shaped. Everything lines up just remarkably. This is a descending stairwell in these very tight walls. It just lines up with the ascending half of that stairwell there on the other building. It's a whole thing. Ooh, what am I doing here? What's the story? What's the story? Should I take off my coat? Maybe I'm having some friction issues here. I know, at our age, what can we expect? So, all right. Here's one of the entry buildings, and I just wanted to show you, talk about lining up. Again, $1.5 billion. Don't, especially those huge glass panes, about 12 by 12, they're curved. I love that. This all slides back, and then you see you can go out there, and there's this reflecting pool with hateful tourists, but whatever. And then you can keep going out, and then you're through that arc at the edge, and you're sort of looking out over the whole world. And the whole Getty Center is set up this way. It is so planned and so thoughtfully and in ways sort of megalomaniacally executed. That's another aspect to a formality we're going to get into. It really goes into everybody's dreams of power. But before it does that, however, watch what happens next. You get to this overlook there, and as if that wasn't good enough, then there's a stairway, and you're thinking, well, what's going on here? And that gets to the other element of really wonderful formality, as opposed to stupid formality, is surprise. Because when you walk down that staircase, you come to a cactus garden on top of a whole promontory. Who knew? Is that like 500 narrow cacti? And then other kinds of weird succulent stuff. And of course, there is no reason for it, just then that was what was needed. I always put a cactus promontory on my billion-dollar project. Duh. And look at this. I mean, there is no function of that except for that it just had that be there to make it fun. And is that like, that's 20 million right there? I mean, duh. So a certain surprise is great, and also just shameless milking the transition from one space to another. In Formality, the spaces are so geometric because they're often divided up. They're not just lined up, they're often divided up by hedges and walls, and often it's very constricted to get from one space to the other, as we've seen in the Getty Center. And that means when you finally get through the little aperture and look at the other side, you go, oh my gosh, that's so cool. If you just could have seen it right from the beginning, you never would have gone up to do it. So here is this is a peak moment. This is in Quebec, and I can tell you how to get into this garden. It'll cost you, but it'll be worth it. This is a private estate in Quebec, and done with an infinity of talent and just totalitarian commitment and budget to match. This is just one aspect of it. Yes, rope bridges across a ravine, planted with the most sophisticated woodland plantings. Just if you're a plant geek like I am, your knees are weak the whole time. And you're going across this rope bridge, and of course the sides of it are only like at my mid-thigh, and it's like waving back and forth, and I'm like trying. It's so terrifying. And you're like, I have to do it. I have to be strong. I'm the man, blah, blah, blah. So you get across the rope bridge, you scramble up through really miscellaneous woods, and all of a sudden there's this narrow aperture, and you get into this obviously incredibly structured geometric space here. These are hedges of arborvitae. The great thing about Quebec is that it's all about the perennials, because no other trees are hardy. It's just birch and arborvitae and maple, that's it. So it's all about the herbaceous stuff for interest. But you have arborvitae, you make hedges out of it, and there are these pools there, and you wander and thinking, oh, this is a small space, it's intimate, it's so severe, but it has like a religious intensity to it. And then you get in and you turn to the left. Oh. And this, God help us, is where he keeps his pigeons. You know, it's a tough life. You have priorities, you satisfy. This is the pigeonier. And I will, which is this fanciful tower, and there are those 10 birds up at the top. And with this black bottom pond, and yes, it cuts through, you'll see later, it cuts through all of these hedges. I'm chairman of a board in Providence, and there's an anecdote connected with this. And my vice president at the time had a house way up in the very north country of Vermont. So she was only about 3 hours from here. And she's also a landscape designer, as am I. And when she found that I was here, she was very excited, and also I had an extra admission. It's very hard to get in here. You have a letter that's sent to you, and you must surrender that when you go through the gate. And we, for odd reason, had an extra letter. So she revenged her life mightily, so that she dropped everything. She could drive up, she could stay overnight, and she could finally come to this great garden. And she's a very restrained New England woman. She's a dear, but you cannot call her over the top. And when she got into that vestibule, and we had long gone, she came to the next room. She got through the vestibule, and she looked at the pigeonier, and she was telling me afterwards, and she's like so New England. She said, Louis, I burst into tears. And my husband, the good, decent husband standing beside, making the money, that kind of husband kind of thing. And he was like, honey, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she was like, it's too wonderful, I can't take it. So. And it is. I'm telling you, it is. Here's another shot. I know. And another shot. It's just to die. And then there it is from above. So you can see, when we want a tower, we don't screw around. We get a tower. When we want those hedges along the side, that's what we get. And when we need a lake at the end, we put it in. And then when we need 500 acres more of meadow with the right color cattle, it's done. So Formality is the thing for people with big appetites. Now, Formality is so friendly, and this is a dangerous slope for people. It's a top-down thing. Someone had to decide that no, the lake goes there, and yes, those are the cattle. Formality is not a group growth activity. It's not collaboration. Formality is a singular vision that is executed, hopefully by people who are smiling, but who cares if they're not? So, and we're going to see. So it's a top-down vision. Now, this is, as I recall, the British ambassador's house in Washington, D.C., which is just an easy example of the architecture of Edward Lutyens, who I knew about as the designer of a million British country houses, often paired with beautiful gardens of Gertrude Jekyll, and it was all just lovely and fuzzy, and the Delphiniums were huge, and it was all just great. And then who knew, or me, ignorant me, discovered that Edwin had a whole other career where he designed New Delhi. For about 20 years, he worked on this. I know, I was stunned too. And I haven't been there, I'm so sorry to tell you. But this is a book by an obscure publisher, and it is called Imperial Delhi. And it is just about the construction of New Delhi. And this, which it looks, see, those are people? Look at those little guys there. People. This is not the capital of India. No, 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 no. This is, quote unquote, the Viceroy's house. Not the Viceroy's, geez, it's bigger than Versailles Palace, just the Viceroy's house. And, which is, it's a strange looking thing. And then this is the backyard of the Viceroy's house. And these gardens that I find really scary and not at all anything that would interest me, but I was sort of just stunned by them because of course, they just appear to go for miles and miles. That's the thing with formality. If you can get rid of that mountain at the other end and extend the axis, you do it. And the scary part to me happened just this morning because I was looking at this plan, and then I also found a ground plan of the gardens, and I just assumed that we were sort of looking right down the main axis, main axis, main axis. And the point I was really going to make and snicker about was that there are 8 tennis courts here, 4 on the side. And you're thinking, well, of course, that's what I need to. So I was thinking, okay, 8 tennis courts. And I was getting all sort of hot and bothered about that until I realized that actually I wasn't even looking at the main axis. I was looking at just a side axis to the main axis. This is just the side. See that lily pad doodah there? The main axis was over there. This was just the side axis, just only going 2 miles to there. So it was an uncompromising vision. I didn't say I liked it, but it was an example of how remarkable you can do when you have 20 years and apparently all the money to spend. Now, let's go and look at a little more of Imperial Delhi. This is from the air, or it's the model actually. And up here's the quote-unquote Viceroy's house with the gardens, and this huge axis here with government buildings. It looks very, very well imperial because that's what it was supposed to be. And you know, it all depends on what master you're serving. This is another plan, also very, very imperial, that was actually proposed just about 5 years after New Delhi, Imperial Delhi opened. And Imperial Delhi was sort of worked on in the 20s and became really sort of more finished in the early 30s. In 1937, somebody in Germany said, wow, I can do that even better. So Albert Speer did this design, also sort of actually thinking about Imperial Delhi, also with the huge domed building, oops, at the top. Let me get my, top. Let's go back, come on. Oops, there we go. I am just, there we go. With the huge dome building at the top, the long thing, which actually will have a column in the middle, and then the arch. This is a big routine. That's why this book is so fun. They realized that that's the ultimate imperial city routine. You have the big palace, you have the column in the middle, and then you have the arch at the end. It happens in Paris, it happens in Australia. He gave like a list of like 12 cities. And it was supposed to happen in Berlin, but that darn World War didn't work out as everyone thought. But so formality really depends on who you're serving. Here's Washington, D.C., which looks very, very tiny compared to Delhi. But also, you see, it's the exact same thing. We have the Capitol, and then there's the Washington Monument and other stuff at the end. So if your ideals are good, formality can work great for you. If your ideals are terrible, it can work even better. I guess that's the problem here. And on a much smaller scale, This is the University of Virginia, done by Thomas Jefferson, and this is a juiced up drawing I just cribbed out of a book. But I love that he was so into, one of the other through lines of my argument tonight is grass, and he was so into all of this lawn, which was an impossibility for at least a century and a half after he tried to do it. This is from grass seed he brought back from Europe. So he was so totally into grass. We're going to come back to grass in a second. So formality, really, really tempting. Now we get to look at some people like Albert Speer who did not know when to stop. This is a private house in Newport, and I did not know. I was actually in this garden, 6 years later, where it was just overgrown, just terrible stuff. I had no clue about it. But it was the garden of a woman named Mrs. James, and this is, of course, an old colorized slide, as you can see. And then let's see the lady herself. I love Mrs. James. I try to get her in every single lecture. And this is from a book called This Was My Newport, published in 1913. And this is the caption, and just listen. The Lady Sapphira. A stately lady was seen advancing. A gown of rich blue trailed behind her. Jewels flashed in a high headdress, and she carried a wand on which blue flowers were entwined. There were excited queries and whispers. And then a debutante exclaimed, "Why, it's Mrs. James." And of course I'm thinking, you're going to Mrs. James's party and you don't know who Mrs. James is. What kind of a din ball for you? And then, of course, I'm also thinking, Mrs. James is at a party. The thing about this that is so staggering, there is no irony here. She is like, yeah, here I am with my wand and my scepter and my crown. How are you? And let me just do this. I know, it's just formality people just get so out of control on. And here's one way they did it. They did it actually, I know you think we're going to talk about horticulture, we will. And we're going to do some right now, because one of the weird instruments of warfare in terms of my formality is more formal than yours, turns out to be annuals. And this only started in about the 1840s for a complicated number of reasons. Come to the annuals lecture and I'll tell you all about those. But this is, I want to show you, this is a before and after. And this is from a book from 1845, written by Mrs. Loudon, and it's called The Lady's Country Companion, or How to Enjoy a Country Life Rationally. I get no irony, I know. All right, and this is the manor house in its original state, with all the windows shaded by some lofty Scotch pines, quote, which are certainly the most gloomy of all the vegetable race. So, okay, fine. She gets rid of the pines, and what does she do? She puts in geometric beds, which, trust me on this, are of annuals. So, and look at how to the millimeter they are. So these are annuals, not billowy Gertrude Chico annuals. These are annuals that look sort of like that. Just choke them. I know. These are annuals that are done in carpet bedding. They are, just if you were just all planted by the bazillion. And they look perfect and they last the whole season. Now I'm going to, I think the next slide is, yes, this is a plan not for stained glass window, but for carpet bedding. So now carpet bedding was serious business, and actually in England, where a lot of these things started in the 19th century, which is where we are, they actually had these things, the amount of carpet bedding you would do, you were permitted according to your rank. So if you were just a marquis, you could like plan on 5,000 annuals. If you were a duke, I don't know what the hierarchy is, you could do 10,000 or something. And if you were the king, you could have like 40,000 of these. Well, it turns out that England being England, of course, not quite as a Big Ten society as it wants to be today, who was the person who lent all the money to all those titled people? He was a Jew named Rothschild of the banking family. And so he, of course, was not titled, and so was technically not even in the running here. But because he had all the money, he always planted out 60,000. Yes. Anyway, I need some irony too, I can see that. I actually had a little, one moment of playing with annuals on this scale in the year 2000, that's what that dragon is, where in the year 2000 I was hired to represent the United States, oddly enough, at the world's first ever competition of this kind of three-dimensional carpet bedding, which is called mosaic culture. And this is up in Montreal, where they know a thing or two about municipal gardening, believe me. So that was the entry from China, this dragon with the 2000, and that's about 50,000. It took people like 2 months, 30 people 2 months. There's like something in every inch there. And here's what I did. I was representing the city of Boston. I did a family of swans, which are, of course, the Boston avian mascot. And this is my old camera. I'm so sorry for the quality of the pictures, but they're the swans, and there's me and Mom. And Mom was 8 feet tall and 15 feet long, and she is feathered with about 4,000 hens and chicks. I just love that. And I was right next to Paris. You can see there's China across the canal, and there's Paris right next to me. And I had Disney on the other side, but they were really, well, no surprise, too tacky, so I'm going to get to that. And here I am, lording it around with one of the big designers from Europe, and we're being very official and commenting on how fabulous we are. And here I am looking so lovely with my jacket that jacket, the arms are so short. But anyway, and so that was up all summer long. And of course, Montreal and Canada having a much stronger civic society than we do here in America, there was no problem for them to just lend this exhibition, which there were like 40 countries, which was up from June through October, 50 gardeners from the municipal staff to take care of it for the rest of the summer. New York City doesn't have 50 extra gardeners. I don't think it has 50 gardeners. But Montreal, no problem. All right, back to the 19th century and warfare by other means, which is annuals. This is just a shot from an estate, thank you, not a palace, up in godforsaken upstate New York somewhere, called Centerbrook. And this is a big parterre where you had these raised things so you could look down. You had these big berms, and this is just one of these parterres. And you can see this is like 50,000 little who knows whats that are making this big, fleur-de-lis thing. And this was only for like 3-4 months. So it was just a staggering amount of display. And not a surprise that people got a little bit miffed about this, and there was other contrary currents all through the 19th century. Started almost by this gentleman here who did this park in Newburgh, New York. This is Andrew Jackson Downing. And he was one of the, even before Olmsted, he was one of the big founding fathers of American landscape design. And he was very much into grass and trees and also duckweed on the water things there. And I have a quote from him. So he was against the geometry and formality, and he was also against the enclosure of it. And as he said, the close proximity of fences to the house gives the whole place a confined and mean character. A widespread lawn, on the contrary, where no boundaries are conspicuous, conveys an impression of the ample extent and space for enjoyment. So he's throwing down a gauntlet. He's pro-lawn, he's anti-fences, and also he's very moralistic. If you're enclosing, there's something wrong with you. And this is a big a through line. Here's a book. This is the first big landscaping book in America, just published after the Civil War, when, believe it or not, the suburbs began, not in Levittown, just after the Civil War. And by a gentleman named Frank Scott, who, again, I try to keep in every lecture because he's so screwed up. And here's his ideal suburban scene. Look at this. This is one house, the other house, the other house. You can see right across everybody's front yards for like 6 or 7 houses, which actually looks very similar today. This was so different than what had gone before, where everything would have been fenced and hedged, and the rest of the world still does it that way. So here's what Frank had to say about his thoughts on hedging. The practice of hedging one's ground so that the passerby cannot enjoy its beauty is one of the barbarisms of old gardening, as absurd in our day as the walled courts and barred windows of a Spanish cloister, and as needlessly aggravating as the close veil of Egyptian women. Frank has issues with women, so come to the annuals lecture, trust me. The high hedge isolates a pedestrian as completely from the view of the grounds as a jail wall. He then, in a later paragraph, pulls it all the stop and calls anyone who would plant such a street-side hedge unchristian. So not only you're vaguely third world and heathen. It's just like low blow. So formality, which depends on those lines that hedges and fences create, was really being under attack here. This is from 1882, as I recall. This, believe it or not, this is before and after from a gentleman named Professor Hill who published a book on manners. Now, in the 19th century, manners could mean everything from how to sing to how to write a condolence letter to how to dress to also how to landscape. It was a one book serves all. And I just stumbled upon this, and this is why these lectures arise, because I go, this can't be real. These things are so crazy. So this is the before picture of people who are troubled by their neighbors. This illustration represents a common scene. The neighbors suspect each other, and they destroy the beauty of their grounds in an attempt to shut each other out. Suspicion and selfishness rule. Regardless of the rights of others, animals are allowed to trample to pieces the sidewalks, to destroy shade trees, and to despoil the neighbor's yard. Inharmony, disorder, and ill feeling among the people are characteristics of the neighborhood. And why the cause of all that is very counterintuitively because you have a fence. I know, it doesn't make any sense, but when you see the next slide, the neighborhood where people live in harmony. This represents a neighborhood where people evidently do unto others as they wish others to do unto them. They trust each other. The barriers between them are removed. Enjoying peace and beauty, they evidently desire that the neighbors shall share the same. This cooperation, kindness, and regard for all give the beauty, harmony, peace, and evident contentment which are here presented. So, in other words, if you have to put up a fence, it's because you're a bad person. If you were really moral and under control, and if your animals were moral and under control too, none of you would need to put a fence. So putting up a fence is just an admission of that you are not a civilized person. You are not a member of a community. Instead, you should have, look at these, not just sidewalks to the front. And I love this Copacabana paving. Anyway, but look at this. The sidewalks go from house to house to house to house. It's very, not a commune, but there's a very implicit sense of we're all in this together, and we don't want to keep divisions because the wrong kind of people will be behind those divisions. And now let's flip forward to 1936. A friend of mine, knowing that I was collecting strange things, found this brochure in her house in New Rochelle. It had come with the house. This is a development called New Wilmot Woods, and a little suburbia. And here, a lovely picture of the prosperous, stern-looking developer. And this text is too small, so I'm going to highlight two things of it for you. Oops, are we going to do that? There we go. Here in the lovely Scarsdale Heathcote section of New Rochelle, a new colonial village is in the making. A background of century-old trees, planned community of 150 homes, built around an old-time village green. So it's at that very much colonial America revival thing. Now, since each house stands on no less than an approximate 1/4 to 1/3 acre, in other words, tiny lots. That's what they're not saying that, but oh my God. And fences are taboo. They just throw that in. The result is wide vistas of neighboring lawns and gardens. Now that's sort of like the previous gentleman, where if you don't have the fences, you get to have a sense of common. You get to enjoy the common vista. That's true. But then let's follow that sentence at the bottom. It gets incidentally the builders of Wilmot Woods. Incidentally, the builders of Wilmot Woods believe that neither people nor houses of radically different traditions make congenial neighbors. So they sensibly restrict the sale of these American homes to American families of refinement. Oh, I see. Who do you think they're keeping out? Come to the privacy lecture, and in brief, every era that suburbs developed from the Civil War through, they simultaneously prohibit fences, and they also explicitly discriminate against somebody in the process. So it was the 1880s, it was the Irish. If it was Levittown in the 50s, it was blacks. And if it was Wilmot Woods in the 30s, I'm guessing it was Jews. So, so formality was, and the walls were just a hiding place for immoral or people who were not like us. Bad, bad, bad. Now, the other reality, of course, is that these suburbs were designed with this wonderful, wavy street, this bucolic pastoral thing, because suburbs were not in the cities. People were in the suburbs because they didn't want to be in the city. They were escaping the cities, which were dirty and full of high crime and expensive. And indeed, this is the first suburb in America. It's Riverside outside of Chicago. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on when. 1860, I think that's what I'm reading there. And So it'd be very hard to have a formal access if you only have a quarter acre, and if all the streets are so curving, how could you have that big perspective? So indeed, the only straight line here, that's the railroad tracks going into the city. In other words, straight lines have come to mean access into the expensive, unhealthy, and crime-ridden city where also the husbands have to go to make all the money. So the straight lines have all these strange negative aspects. Now, I am just old enough to have thought that if everything worked out great and I was really successful when I grew up, in other words, be the age I could be now, I could own a house like this too. This is just a two-tone split level with a scarlet front door just for an accent. So suburbia really had big issues with formality in general. And not surprisingly, because suburbia, at least the myth of it was that it was so casual, it was so relaxing, it was so low maintenance. You were just hanging around the pool, that's so swell. And also, it was so easy that the Rio Deluxe Tremolon Carnivore, even Junior, could run it. So it was low maintenance and just very easy and casual. How many hospital corner flower beds would Junior destroy on that behemoth? I mean, look at and I have to, don't you wish for OSHA now? Look at this. Unprotected blade, he's reading a book, Dad's just, So you can imagine that the kind of, again, top-down, maniacal dedication to the program of geometric purity, uncompromising this and that just goes out the window because it all gets mowed down. And here, soon everybody got the message, even the important people who you would think would know better. And I've been on the Victory Garden, so I'm allowed to snipe. This is from the Victory Garden, one of their books itself, and this was a model house that they did in Chicago or someplace like that. And in the front yard, which you notice, it's Chicago, it's totally flat. There's not an inch of grade change here. So why are we curving to avoid that half-inch of elevation over there, maybe? Or what? We're curving for no reason other than we need to be attractive. And also, look, it's completely open except for that hateful neighbor who has a hedge there. What's wrong with them? Right? And the cool thing is, so curvy out front, that's graceful, that's public, that's all fine. But in the back, this is the great part. And again, they don't say anything about this because it would be dynamite if they did, of course. So here's the front, the meandering stuff, it's all graceful and curvy. In the back, it's all private. Because when they gave up and started fencing the backyards in suburbia, people just couldn't take it anymore. So they fenced in the back. Look, it's all rectangles and squares. It's not formal, but it is certainly geometric. Partly because the back is where the husband of the house would do the do-it-yourself projects. He would build the patio, he would build the brick barbecue, and all those things, because it is do-it-yourself. They are inherently about making blocks and boards, and so rectangles sneak back into it. The other big thread here, remember I talked about grass? Well, now it's time to talk just for a bit about what is this? This is actually a golf course in Norway, but the golf courses have changed, and I see you have one here, so you're experiencing this directly. Golf courses have very substantially changed everything about design outside of cities. Partly because golf courses are so astoundingly popular. There was the first golf course happened in like 1888, something like that. By 1948, there were over 6,000 of them. There were 1,000 a year built some years in the 1960s. And golf courses are inherently, no matter where they are, this is in the desert somewhere, they're about wandering curves. There's no formality possible with a golf course. It just doesn't work with the game itself. So this was the ideal. This was the most grand landscape most people would ever be able to partake of. This was at the country club. So this was the model of what fabulous, the ultimate luxury and display should be. This wonderful, just curving, rolling trees and grass kind of landscape. It wasn't that they were against formality, but formality just nobody even thought about it. They wouldn't apply at all to this. Now, one of the realities then is by the time I started doing this lecture, it can't have been back in 1992. Is that really possible? Oh my gosh. White Flower Farms used to have great catalogs, the gorgeous ones, the expensive ones, and the cover of a catalog, that's the most important picture that organization puts out all year. That's the cover of the catalog. If something was on it, it was supposed to be on it. If something wasn't on it, you may be sure that they made sure it wasn't on it. I don't see one straight line there, let alone a hedge, let alone an axis with perspective, let alone a column and an arch behind it. Formality has nowhere to go in those gardens. Now, I'm here to say that Formality is back a little, and I'm going to show you a bit. One reason why I think it's come in through our kitchen door, because vegetable gardens are so popular now, and rightly so, and vegetable gardening is inherently a right angle, raised bed, rectangles, and lined up kind of activity. This is a project very near here of some amazing people, clearly, who bought a couple of acres, and they won me at an auction, by the way. I donated 10 hours to a charity auction here, and these people went to the auction website. They then followed the link to my website. They came and they said, oh, we're going to get him, and they did. And I got a project. Think of whatever budget you want and then add 3 zeros to it and you'll have what this is out of that auction donation. So let's look at that right there. A huge vegetable garden. Here's one portion of it, all grown up. I know it's huge, but these raised beds are 25 feet. I think long. I think that raised bed is something like 12 feet square. On and on and on and on. And that's not enough, because then they also need, this is a young cutting garden, and that meshed structure at the end is unique and also full of these beds. That's a permanent structure in which you can raise soft fruit. It's important, you know. When you need soft fruit, you just have to have the structure. So it's permanently meshed, that's stainless steel mesh, and so grapes, raspberries, blueberries. So the mesh is just big enough that bees can come in to pollinate, but not that extra quarter inch so the birds can come in and eat the fruit. It was an amazing, amazing project. And with the vegetable garden, it really had to have a very strong lined up character. Here's another one. This is a much older project. This is on the shore in Narragansett. You get off the parking cart, go up those steps. And I'm going to get the vegetables here. This is just a bit of a beauty pageant sideline here. And there are these decks with these out-of-control, fabulous window boxes on them. And then you sort of look over those and go, oh my gosh, we're on the water. And there's the swimming pool. And there's some huge borders here. And they line up with that, which, if any of you have Rhode Island literacy, and I tell you that that's Beavertail Lighthouse, you'll be able to extrapolate back. And next time you fly into Providence, you can see this property. It's that noticeable. You may even know these people. They are phenomenal people and fabulous clients, as you might imagine. So you wander through these first pair of double borders, ringing this swimming pool with fabulous stuff about 20 feet wide. And you go down to the other pair of double borders, which are centered on the lighthouse. There we go. That gate is 6 feet tall and 12 feet wide. It's huge. This borders are 40 feet deep and 200 feet wide. They're as big as that Wilmot Woods development, itself. And so I had a really great time with them. They're so huge that there is really almost nothing that is a flower, a perennial, that would be of interest, because you're looking at these 150 feet away from the house. So these are borders that only need to be appealing from June through October. They're almost entirely woody. So there's very few flowering things, except when you can get woody things to flower. There's amazing amounts of wonderful foliage. Come to the Color in the Garden lecture, and you'll understand why it's all yellow. Yes, there is one big daisy there, but mostly this is about staggering woody things. This is a yellow-leaved catalpa tree, cut down to a stump each year, and it repays us with this wild foliage. And there's the black-leaf version also. That's the Morticia Adams flag here. And here's just another staggering shrub. It's an amazing property. It really has a hallucinogenic feel to it. I continue to be staggered that I was able to do it for them, and that we're still talking. They're just so fabulous. But then, gosh darn it, here's that gate. And you get to see this in the winter when, remember, nobody's there. It's all just sticks. It's remarkable. What's going on back here? Well, there was a whole huge area there. And they're screened by 10-foot-tall bayberries just dropped in almost by helicopter of huge raised beds, 40 of them. People have their needs. These are 4 feet long by 10 feet. They're 18 inches tall, 40 of them. And then 400 feet of 8-foot-tall fence. It just went on and on.
so that this man could do what he loves to do most, which is grow tomatoes and zinnias and just have a fabulous time, at the seashore. An amazing, amazing project. But Formality doesn't have to be huge, or it doesn't have to be as clearly gigantically expensive as both those projects. This was something I did many years for a show house in Newport. I had a friend who lent me this amazing hand-carved granite edging here, and I made this little teeny-weeny parterre, and there I am, looking shy. And some of the reason don't come back to other lectures because you get to see me with the different hairstyles through the decades. Also, what you can't see is that's the ponytail. It goes all the way down to my waist. What was I thinking? That's a whole other story. But this parterre is so nice because you look at it this way, it looks great. And what if you stand here and look at the cross-axis, you look back at the house, it still looks great. It looks just as great that way. And then there's a picture of me looking smug. Oh well, whatever, moving on. Here's another small garden. This garden is only 20 feet square. This is the first garden I got in Metropolitan Home, I'm very proud to say. And it's only 20 feet square, it is set into a hill, and yet it is just chock full of wonderful action, and it is shamelessly formal. We're looking up this way through this wonderful bowed gate, right from there. That's 20 feet from there to there. There's another axis going from there to there, as you'll see. And there's the chair at the end, we're just stuffed with cool horticulture. I just love doing this. Southern magnolias, a real special trick of mine, in bloom and having a great time. And here, just perennials, just almost with hurt your eyes intensity. And then at the end of the other axis, this was all there. This is a trickling grotto. The stonework was there. This was a 1917 mansion in Rhode Island that just sort of fallen apart in the woods, and this couple had the wherewithal to rescue it. And then here, you can stand up on the hill and look down, and you can see how tiny the garden is. There's the bench. These are 5 foot, I think 5 or 6 feet pies of bluestone, and this little bluestone table looking out. So it's a tiny, tiny space, but it just has such voluptuous intensity, if I do say so myself. And there, the nice part also is, and this is the advantage of small-scale Formality, because you have a boundary on it, there's the gate. You can do whatever you want here, and then you can immediately step down with intensity or aesthetics outside that. If you have a naturalistic landscape, it's very hard to say, oh, well, we're not going to mow anymore. It just looks like I went to hell. But if you had a formal landscape, you mow up to that line, and then on the other side of it, boom, it's just nature. So it actually can be, in a weird way, very economical. I'm just going to close with some shots of I live what I say. So Formality at my house. This is the before picture. It's a 1760 center chimney colonial in just right over the border in Rhode Island with a carriage house and not much. We cleared it and leveled it a bit, and that took a couple of years, believe me. And so this is pretty much the before picture. And then I had finally done, you can see a budding formalist. I had a very clipped standard I could plant here and a walkway lining up with the back door. And so I was really good at that. And I was just planting, these are 2 southern magnolias, which again, if you plant the right cultivar in the right spot, they thrive. There they are. Wow. 10 years later, evergreen. Now they are not against the building, they're against a pipe frame that they're covering, but they're going to go up clear to the roof. And yes, they are in bloom until October. And here was one year when I had tree dahlias in front of them, these big, huge things. So the advantage of Formality is that it enables you to be, if you're of a bent, which I clearly am, to want to have an infinity of fabulous horticulture. If you have a formal layout, your garden just doesn't become a terrible mess because you still have the geometry that gives you order, which allows you to be even wilder in the beds. Now this winter, oh my gosh, could that have been any snowier? And it was really fun to go out. And this was actually, there's like about 1.5 feet of snow on the ground, and look back at the house as it is getting, you can see how tall the magnolias are getting. It's very, very exciting. And I'm a big believer in structure in the garden, at least in my garden, because again, I only have 2 acres. I know, a lot, but not. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plants that I have to grow. And I couldn't just fit them in if I would just let them all grow free range. So they have to be trained and pruned, and not in the French shrink-wrapped way, but just so that they're under control. So anytime I can train a rose over a structure, that's great. And also, that means I get to have a structure that marks this pathway and a cross pathway going that way. So, that's it. I think that was like the middle of last summer, where it gets pretty fabulous. Come for a tour. And here, again, in that snow in the winter, isn't that amazing? We had that 2 feet of snow. This here, this is a wonderful screen to the property. This is espaliered red twig linden trees. Now, I have been in this site only 14 years. And as you can see, I started from the ground up. And yet, look, there it is. Those are the lindens. They're red twig lindens. They're 10 feet tall. This is a hedge of American holly on the other side. And a really nice light in the winter, the twigs just glow. Someday, when the oil well kicks in, we'll be able to buy that building across the street. But, yes, someday. Oh, and then, looking out the back door, with the magnolias now at my back, looking out to that standard, that beautiful clipped standard there, which I put another ball on. I got very excited about that. In the winter, you can see there's a lot of structure in this garden, but also that it's actually pretty compact. Oh, there, the slides are out of order, sorry. This is at the end of that hallway. This was the red twig linden. This was the American holly, and in the summer, I put some fun annuals at the back to give it some color. Sorry, I'll get these slides in order. And again, oh my gosh, in the snow, thank goodness for structure. It gives us something to look at. And again, in the summer, that's what that structure turns back into. I like that so much. Let's look at that again.
Yeah.
There, that's snow. 6 months later.
Wow.
I know, that's what I say. I'm just like so stunned by it. And then, now looking out the center, in other words, the chimney's right in back of me. There's a second floor library thing. And you can see, I practice what I preach. The property is about 500 feet deep. And the house is right at the front row because it's an 18th century setup. So when we were looking at so the magnolias are against the face around the corner here with that standard and stuff. Here's the central axis of the property. Here, this is a couple of years ago. Here's the rose pergola. There's one crosswalk there in the red garden. Another crosswalk here in the pink borders. I know, but I'm saying it with irony. Okay, give me credit here. And then out there, just because I had to have it, it's a 70-foot reflecting pool. Just, we all have to have what we have to have. And it's a 70-foot reflecting pool. It's only 16 inches deep, though, so it doesn't need to be fenced. And let's see what this turns out. And this, of course, is the projecting back wing of the house here. Let's see what this turns into. In the summer, it becomes heaven. And here's more at ground level. And again, a different year. This rose is making great progress over the canopy here. But you can see these are slides from different years. Some years it's bigger and smaller. It's almost getting all the way across. And so the central axis here really saves this garden from being overwhelmingly just a jungle and a jumble. Because the geometry is so uncompromising, the plants can be that much more freewheeling, and yet it doesn't seem just unmanageable. And this plant here is usually at the very center under this pergola because it is itself formal. This is a pot of Chinese banana, and here's another shot where the rose is doing great, and I haven't yet yanked that pot into the right spot. But let's look at the Chinese banana. Here it is. It bloomed for me one year. This bloom started in March and was still going strong in October. These flaps, like an orange, are just released out, and then those are the little flowers right around there. And it just keeps doing it. So it has this, it's the point at the center of everything. And it really is. It's just amazing. And I'm so sorry to say that is my last slide. And that was taken just today. It was such a fabulous day. This has nothing to do with formality. This is my winter aconite just coming out. It's only 2 inches tall. And the bees were so desperate to get out, there was a waiting list. As you can see, every flower had it. So I think formality, it depends on where your head is. If you're of good karma, you can do great things with formality. Even better than you can do with naturalism. So thank you so much for being a patient and enthusiastic crowd.